Welcome to the Leading Hope Podcast with Kevin Jack. Your influence will lead people somewhere, lead them towards hope. Everyone has 20 minutes to learn to become a better leader. Make it count.
Welcome to Leading Hope with Kevin Jack. I'm your host, VJ Williams, here with my friend and pastor, Kevin Jack. Thank you for joining us and taking time out of your day to become a better leader. We release a new episode every Wednesday, so we'd love for you to share on social media and bring others along with us on this journey of becoming a better leader. Visit leadinghope.online to get updates and find out more about the Leading Hope community. If you're new to the podcast or haven't subscribed yet, we would love for you to do that right now. Also, post about it, rate, and review. You will not believe how that helps get this podcast in the hands of so many more leaders just like you. Kevin, are you excited, man? We're starting a new series today on capacity.
If you're watching on YouTube, we've got a new setup.
Got a new setup.
Look at this.
There's something right here we'll talk about at some point. Not right now.
If you're listening on audio, everything is the same. You're missing nothing. Yes. Everything is great.
That is right. Man, I really am so excited about this new series, Capacity. It starts today, episode 44, Expand the Container. Expand the Container.
Expand the Container. So in this series, I am pumped for this series on capacity. I just want to say that because even in researching some of the pieces on this, from conversations we were having with staff and Hope team members, of Be Hope Church, it realized like, hey, this is an issue. And so I learned so much just within the study of this and found out so many things in my own life. And so what I want to do is, this is a 5-part series, but with this first one, I just want to explain an idea. I want to take us through just this overall concept so we can get a grasp as to what we're talking about when it comes to capacity. And so I'm just going to use a simple definition for capacity so you understand what we're not talking about. Capacity is the level of responsibility that you can handle. The level of responsibility that you can handle. It's not about working more hours, okay? That is not what we're talking about. It may be a little bit what we're talking about, but it is overall the level of responsibility that you can handle. And so this is the metaphor that I want to use throughout this entire series to help us understand this is imagine that you have a large container and that filled with the container are all these different blocks and they're different shapes and they're different sizes, and it just filled within the container are blocks. So some of you may have a Lego bin or a block or something like that. So you've got that picture in your head. And imagine this, the container is you. The container is your life. And the blocks of all different shapes and sizes are all the different things that fit into your life, all the different things that are involved in your life. And so what happens is that as the container gets full, as the container gets filled up with blocks, you feel full. You feel like I'm nearing capacity. And so what we inevitably do is, I do this with my kids in their toy bins. When the toy bin is full, either we typically start taking toys out.
Yep.
Like hey, we don't need this. We don't need it, which is kind of how we live our life. We go, hey, my blocks are getting full. Hey, my blocks are overflowing. It's time to take some blocks out. This block doesn't matter. Sometimes we accidentally just leave out blocks that really do matter. And this is just kind of the ebb and flow is in your life. We typically go, hey, more blocks are filling up. Let's take some out. It'll be empty for a little bit and it feel like, oh, this feels good. And then we'll start filling it up again. And we just kind of go back and forth. And so here's the question that we are asking in this series. What if you could just make the container bigger? What if the container itself could expand? What if we didn't run this rhythm constantly back and forth of have other people throw blocks in our container, we throw some blocks back out, which is some of you how you respond when your boss gives you an assignment. Like, here's a block, and no, I don't want that block within there. What if the container itself could expand? What if we could increase the container? And I know there's like this within everyone, there's kind of like this initial pushback of going, that just sounds like more work. My life is already so busy. I've already got so much pressure. But this is what I found. Everyone thinks they're at human capacity, like everyone thinks they're at their limit until someone shows them that it can be done.
Yeah.
And so 2 examples real quick. There was a belief before Roger Bannister ran the first sub 4-minute mile.
Just talked about that yesterday. Sorry.
Before Roger Bannister ran the sub 4-minute mile, there was this growing belief that it couldn't be done.
Yeah.
Like there was this strong belief of just going, I don't think a human being can actually do that. And we actually saw this play out just a couple of years ago where somebody ran a sub 2-hour marathon. And I can remember the weeks later, they're like, oh, he's going to attempt it. Oh, it's got to be perfect conditions. Oh, it's this. And then other people would go like, I don't think a person can do it. So Roger Bannister ran the first sub 4-minute marathon, or 4-minute mile, sorry. And then 46 days later, someone else broke the sub 4-minute mile.
Yeah.
And then a year later, 3 runners broke it in the same race.
Yeah.
And so it's just fascinating because there was this thought of going, no, we're already at human capacity. And then someone showed it can be done, and you go, maybe we're not. Here's a more interesting study that I found that was actually really recent. So they were working with weightlifters, and they were trying to figure out, like, what is your capacity as to how much you can lift and how much you can push yourself. So what they would have is they would have a builder do a set to failure. Go as hard as they can until they absolutely couldn't go anymore. They had cranked out every last rep. And then what they had done ahead of time is they had electrodes on the muscles, okay, to provide electric stimulation, and they could gauge the contraction of the muscle. And so the theory would be that if their muscles were really done, when they sent the electric stimulation to the muscle and the muscle contract, the muscle would contract at a much lower contraction than when they were actually lifting, or not at all, which is like, because the body would be like, oh, I'm done, I'm finished. Yeah. And so you go, well, if that's the case, when the electric stimulation is there, your muscle shouldn't be able to contract. And so they go through it, they push the set, they go to the very last rep, they're sweating like crazy. They put the electric stimulation into the muscle, and the muscle would contract at the same strength as it was during the set.
Ah, that's incredible.
And so what that really taught them is said, no, you are mentally done, but your physical body isn't done.
Oh, that's great.
And so the strength that needed to be developed was a strength of your mind of going, no, I can actually push this muscle further than I originally thought it could. Now, let's put a parallel to us. At childhood, you thought you were at capacity.
Yeah.
Like at childhood, like you thought, like your parent, like I want to take you like back, like way, way younger. Your parents tell you, you got 3 things to do. I'm going to leave the house. Here's your chore list. And you'd be like, oh my goodness, like how on earth could I ever get this done? You thought you were at capacity. I can remember getting assigned in high school a 5-page paper and being like, who on earth? Oh, my word.
I'm not a doctor.
Exactly right. It was like a 5-page paper. And then you get to college, you can get your master's. You're like, I can do 5-page papers in my sleep. Like,
yeah,
that's a piece of cake.
Yeah.
But it's to acknowledge all throughout your life, you have thought you were at capacity, and then your capacity expanded. All throughout your life, you have thought at different moments, your container was as big as it could possibly get, and it was completely full. And then you push through it.
Yeah.
And you realize your container got bigger. Like you could expand your capacity. So why on earth, as adults, do we think our container is at its maximum size?
I don't know, Kevin. Why do we?
Well, I don't know if you have my notes or not within this, but that is literally the next thing. But we all do. Like every adult is like, oh, I can't handle it.
Exactly right.
Oh, I can't handle it.
Absolutely. Everywhere.
And part of it is we don't understand how capacity is expanded. We don't understand how capacity is developed, which is what we're going to get into in a little bit.
Oh, man, I can't wait.
But first, I need to hit on this. I think one of the reasons is because we are overfed a narrative of be careful of burnout, don't be a workaholic. And some of you, like, you didn't need to hear that. Like, I'll acknowledge there's a small percentage who's out there that I should never say that to. And so I just hope you know who you are to go, no, you need to be careful of burnout. You need to be careful of being a workaholic. But this is what I remember from my own development is I was 18 years old at a conference, and a speaker got up there who was in his mid-50s, and he described going through burnout and how he always thought he could do more, and then eventually he burned out. And man, I took that message to heart.
Yeah.
Like at 18, I took that message to heart. And here's the thing. I shouldn't have. I should have filed that away because at the time, I'm talking about myself, not necessarily you. I'm talking about myself. At the time, I was not at risk of burnout. The only thing I was at risk of was actually working up a sweat. I didn't have a work ethic then. I had a motor, but my motor went for my hobbies and my friends and other stuff. I didn't understand. Like, I can remember early messages that I wrote. I'd work on them for like an hour. I'd be like, yeah, I think I'm good. I think I've got everything here.
Yeah.
Now, I understand like the pain you have to go through and the resilience that has to be there to put forth something that you're proud of, to put out something that's quality. And I think what has happened is we kept talking about burnout to a generation that needed to hear about burnout. And we kept talking about being a workaholic to a generation that needed to hear that message. And the next generation heard it, and we applied it before we ever should have.
Yeah.
And I'll hear people in their young 20s, I'll hear people in ministry in their young 20s, just like, oh, I'm just burning out. And I think to them that, no, you just have never worked hard.
Oh, yeah.
And for the first time in your life, you're working hard and you're surprised that this is what it feels like.
Yeah, that's interesting.
So, overall within this, I just want you to see there's two ways to look at it. There's the way to look at it of I'm full, I've got too many blocks in my container, and I need balance. And then there's another way to look at it that says I'm full, my container is too small for all the blocks. I need a bigger container.
Yeah.
And that we're not going to have, we'll get into it as to like, man, how do you know if you're hitting your ceiling? How do you know if you actually are a workaholic or you're at burnout? We're going to get to that into some later ones. But honestly, my hunch heading into this is to go, I do think you have a ceiling. I don't think you have any idea what it is. I think it's way higher than what you think what it is in terms of your capacity. And so like if you're bent, if your initial pushback is to go, no, we need balance. No, we need this. I'm just going to tell you should probably listen to a different podcast.
Yeah.
I believe rest is important.
Oh,
I believe
tremendous.
Rest is important because we don't simply rest from the work that we did. We rest for what's coming.
That's the key.
Like there's a difference between viewing language of diet and nutrition. Diet is restrictive. Nutrition is fueling.
Yeah.
If all your conversation on rest is like, I'm crashing because I'm exhausted. No, like I rest because I'm getting ready for what's about to come because I've got some significant things to do. So that's a lot within there. And it's a matter of, it's not to say balance isn't important because it is. It's not to say rest isn't, and it's not to say you can't burn out or you can't be a workaholic because you are. But I think we've swung the pendulum too far and we've overreacted and we need to re-engage in a conversation on capacity because just like a kid in the way in which you could do more than you previously thought you could, I believe now to this day, you can expand your capacity, and as you expand your capacity, you expand your potential impact.
Man, there's a lot to take in there because there's so many.
And
things.
this is just the introduction.
This is just the introduction, and we have this is a 5-part series.
It's
too.
a 5-part series.
So this is good. I will say you used the word resilience. I think that would be if you're listening to this podcast and maybe not quite ready to do capacity yet that go back and listen to that
That's
resilience.
This
series.
is almost like the sequel to the resilience.
Yeah, it
sequel.
really is because the resilience prepares you for the capacity and being able to learn how to build a bigger container. So I would say that as a note to go back and check that out. We'll put those in the notes too that you guys can go check that series out. But one of the questions you talked about, blocks fill up and we take some out. And I think we do even something worse. I think we sometimes we leave them in there and ignore them. So we're acknowledging that they're important.
Yeah.
Right? But we're not going to do anything about it.
Yeah.
Which means, how would you, that's important. Because you have to expand your container in order to not ignore the things that are important.
Or we'll say it like this. We let other people choose which blocks are in our container and which blocks aren't.
Oh, that's
so
good.
we let our boss walk in and throw out our family blocks and throw in the work blocks.
Yeah.
And then we're just not happy.
Yeah. Talk more about that. Talk more about how it relates to family and kids and finances and how we think.
I just think it's a matter of, so this is going to, if I could tease, I believe the last episode we have within here is just say, the goal is not about having the most blocks you possibly can in your container. The goal is about having the right blocks.
Oh, that's good.
Like that's really, really key.
Yeah.
And this is, I think this is important, is some people, your container is so small, it can handle the family blocks or the work blocks or the friend blocks. And what happens is, so like I've got a large family. My family requires a lot of my time. My kids need a decent chunk of my time. If my container is small, that's all I have time for.
Right.
Like it's all I have time for. And I believe life is just, it's better. I think it's more interesting when I get to be involved in a number of different things.
Yeah.
And part of that is capacity.
Yeah, that's important to realize that you need to have the right blocks. I think that's a huge note.
So let me give you a realization that I had is as we were going through this, is that capacity typically only expands when we're forced to do it. It is only when, like, we very rarely willfully expand our own capacity. So here's an example of we have 4 kids. And I can remember you had kid 1, and you're like, oh my goodness, how do people do it with any more? And then you have 2 kids, and you're like, I don't have any hands. My wife doesn't have any hands. Yeah, and then you have kid number 3, and you're like, what have we done to ourselves?
Yeah.
And it's really funny. So I look at it. So we have 4 kids now. If we ever have one kid is out of the house, my wife and I, we just look at each other like, oh, this is so easy.
It is.
Like, this is a piece of cake. A kid is gone. And I scroll back and I go, 6 years ago, 3 kids, when we only had 2, 3 kids would have felt overwhelming.
Yeah.
But now when we only have 3, it's just like, parents, they have it so easy. But it's because we expanded what we were capable of.
That's a marvelous analogy, because if you're a leader or a parent or a leader parent, that is you. I mean, you've all done that. You're like, oh my gosh, I'm having our second kid and our first one's not out of diapers. Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh. And then you have 4 kids, and then it's like it's so that's a great note. One other question I wanted to ask you real quick is, so here's the question. How do we reject as leaders the narrative of burnout and still be able to learn how to position ourselves to have the right rest and lean into that to prepare us to expand our container?
Oh, that's fascinating. I don't know if I have an answer.
I know.
Do you have an answer?
No, I don't have an answer.
Ask it one more time. Let me think hard.
So the narrative is we have to protect the narrative. We need to protect our time, right? And it's not wrong, but it overshadows the ability to overtake the container, right? It overshadows to improve your container, to what's the title of this? Expand the container.
Yeah.
That is the narrative, right? Protect your time. And we need to change the narrative to, hey, just make your container bigger and figure out the right blocks. How do we do that? What are the things that we need to put? We know resilience is one of them.
And I think this is a hard thing, is because this is where it's just so difficult. Is I go back to my days when I was on staff, when I had a boss. Now I have a board that I'm accountable to. If there were times that I felt overwhelmed, and if my boss would have come in and said, you need to add this because you need to expand your container, I would have heard in my head, he doesn't care about my personal life and my health.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because as I have those conversations, I can see those headlines flash in people's heads.
Yeah.
And it is the hardest thing to understand that I care about you, but you are capable of more than what you're doing now. But the only way that you're going to figure that out is by taking on more.
Yeah.
We don't figure out new ways of efficiency and effectiveness by staying in the same patterns and routines. And so I think the hardest thing on this, and this is maybe where this is so important, this series seriously is so important to me.
Yes.
Is you are the only one who can decide that you're going to expand your capacity. Like, you are the only one that can decide you're going to expand your capacity. No one else can do it for you. Because if other people keep putting stuff upon you, you have the opportunity to expand your capacity. But if you whine about it, you never will. And so it's an individual decision of going, hey, like when I was 5, I wasn't capable of what I was at 10. And like when I was 20, I'm not capable of what I am at 30. I'm going to decide at this age, whatever age that is, I am not at my peak. I am not at my peak. I can handle more responsibility than I currently have.
Yeah. No one took on less responsibility, less work, and grew.
Oh, absolutely
and
right.
That's a good note. Hey, is there something you want to leave anybody with today with this first of what is going to be a power pack series?
So I just encourage, like, some of you hear this and you're hungry and you're like, yes, give me the next episode. Some of you hear this and you're like, oh my goodness, prioritize your personal health, self-care. We need that conversation. I would say, I don't know if I'm going to be able to speak to you well. I want you to know, I want you to be able to do better.
Yeah.
And you're going to hear more, and you're just going to hear, oh, that's all it is. More. No, like, you're capable. I want you to understand what you're capable of. But please, to be open and listen long enough to understand, hey, there's a chance. I'm not saying it's you. There's a chance you need to switch the narrative from I'm going to burn out to I need to expand my capacity.
Oh, that's good. We'll leave it right there for episode 44, Expand the Container. Thank you guys for joining us today. Man, this is going to be awesome. I can't wait for next week. This is going to be incredible, and I hope you guys join us next week. If you're new to the podcast or haven't yet subscribed, we would love it if you did that now. Also, post and rate and review, or both. You won't believe how that helps get this podcast in the hands of so many more leaders like you. And we love hearing your stories of how the podcast is working in your life and your business. And if you have a story, visit leadinghope.online and send that to us. You can contact us. If you have questions, also send them that way as well. We'd love to hear from you. And remember, everyone has 20 minutes to learn to become a better leader. Make it count.